With memories of 2008 still fresh in our minds, it's no wonder talks of a possible recession have the nation on edge. Despite Nevada being hard hit last time around, some believe our state is now recession-proof. We're talking to experts on both sides of the debate. That's next on Nevada Week.
Support for Nevada Week is provided by Senator William H. Hernstat, Cashman Equipment, and additional supporting sponsors.
At the height of the Great Recession, Southern Nevada's unemployment rate skyrocketed to over 15%. Many economists blamed our singular economy, arguing relying predominantly on gaming and tourism left us vulnerable during the crash. Now, over a decade later, talks of another recession are swirling nationwide.
Wealthy families are actually stockpiling cash on recession fears.
As a key predictor of recession is now flashing for the first time since 2007.
To get to a recession in the next 2 years really requires some shock.
However, some economists believe Southern Nevada may now be more resistant to recession due to our expanding business portfolio. The Golden Knights, Amazon, Google, the Raiders, and so many more now call Nevada home. To discuss the possibility of a recession and how our state could be affected, we are joined by John Restrepo, principal of RCG Economics, Tom Blanchard, president-elect of the Greater Las Vegas Association of Realtors, and Mike Pequeen, managing director and partner of Hightower Las Vegas. So John, I wanted to start with you. This is probably not a simple question. It seems like it's a simple question, but are we headed for a recession?
Well, we have been in a 10-year expansion, which is pretty long, and there are, most economists are saying some kind of correction. It could be a mild recession. I don't think anyone's anticipating another great recession, but there are some indicators out there in terms of slowing job growth numbers and at the national level, and slowing in the manufacturing activity. So there's probably going to be some adjustment, probably in the next 12 to 18 months, but I don't think it's going to be something as intense as we saw in 2008.
And I know, at least in the media, this is something that's been presented recently that's maybe caused somewhat of a scare, is the bond market and the inverted yield curve, which is something that has happened in previous recessions, especially in 2007. Is that still as strong of an indicator as it was, let's say, 10 years ago?
No, not as strong. Mike can speak to that because he's more the financial guy. That inverted yield curve thing is kind of an interesting event or issue. We look at it, I think, a little more closely at rates of growth in jobs, rates of growth in wages. In the case of here, Southern Nevada, rates of growth in visitation, and we do see some slowing in the rates of growth. And so where that takes us, I'm not sure, but there is going to be a slowdown. The main thing we need to understand here in Southern Nevada, and I think we do now, I don't think we fully realized it before the Great Recession, that is, whatever happens in Europe and in Asia and globally and nationally affects us directly here in Southern Nevada. We may be a physically isolated community, but we're not economically isolated.
And Mike, let's talk more about the yield curve itself, but also other indicators. We're talking about some of the national and global concerns we have. What are things that you are looking at right now?
Well, when we look at the big picture of what affects Las Vegas, we have to realize that we're both a national and international city. We sell the ultimate consumer discretionary product, recreation. We require everybody to come here and pick it up. We have 20% of our visitors coming from overseas, and they spend probably about 25% of the total spend because they stay longer and spend more. So Las Vegas has to have a global look. And the global economy and the national economy, as John said, are slowing a bit. Still some strong underpinnings, and I don't think that we fall into a technical recession in 2020, but there's no question that we're seeing a bit of a slowdown. So,
well, and something else that's been in the media is a lot of the more wealthy individuals globally are redirecting a lot of their money. Their stockpiling is the word that's been used, converting a lot of the money to cash or looking at more recession-proof types of investments. Are you seeing that locally as well?
Yes, it's not unusual. As John said, we're now in year 10 of this expansion. That's the longest and, by the way, slowest expansion in the history of the United States. And it's been there for 10 years, and people know that eventually something does have to happen in our economy, some sort of slowdown. I agree with John completely. It doesn't have to be nearly what we saw in 2008. In fact, it can be much shallower than an average recession, and when it does come, probably after 2020, in my opinion. But I think it's very normal for people who have investments to turn some of that into cash in anticipation of that. There's an old saying, however, The stock market has predicted 9 of the last 5 recessions. So you can't read too much into the market action to determine if that's really going to happen, because it's very difficult to call when a recession really will occur.
And we're talking about growth. We're talking about maybe there's some ambiguity on when we can call for recession. Tom, in the housing market, we've seen exponential growth. We've seen just a very healthy market that's flattened a little bit. What are you seeing in the housing market right now?
Well, I'm sort of glad this whole slowdown has happened, because it's given the housing market sort of some breathing room. Otherwise, we'd end up with some, I've always explained it as like a pressure cooker. Mm-hmm. You know, you gotta let some steam out of it or it will blow. And we've let some steam out of the market, and thank God. You know, so with this slow growth, with the slowing of housing prices going up astronomically, we're allowing some of the steam to come out, let growth prices catch up on jobs, and allow everybody to take a breather, catch up, and then we can move on. Otherwise, it's just a disastrous outcome.
What are some of the reasons that we are seeing maybe a slow in our local housing market? We have really low mortgage rates right now, but yet we're not seeing necessarily the purchases. Is there a reason for that?
Well, I don't know what the real reasons are, but I look at it as more of a balanced market. We have great mortgage rates, but a tight market, so it's balanced. Everything seems to be more in balance, which causes it to look like it's slow and no understanding of why we're not moving up like we have been. And look, back in the old days, you know, 10, 15, 20 years ago, a 3% increase in your appreciation of a home was great growth. That was expected growth. Now 3% is going, oh my God, the house, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. And now that's just not the case. We're getting back to normal kind of a market, which we used to have, which was a healthy market.
John, about the mortgage rate, right? We're now right now under 4%, I think 3.5% this morning. Right. But we're looking at unemployment rates are about 4% for our state. I mean, have we had rates that have been this low on both unemployment and the mortgage rates before?
Not in a long, long time. But I think we have to go back to the mid-'90s, early '90s to get the low unemployment rates that we saw. And I don't think the mortgage rates have ever been this low. But we do, you know, and Tom makes an excellent point. The good thing about real estate, it's pretty easy to observe whether it's commercial or residential. And that is that prices go up and down based on demand, but that's all tied to wages at some point in economic growth. And we were getting into a situation here that we were concerned about last year. It's even worse in Reno in certain ways, of housing affordability. Yeah. The disconnect between wage growth and housing prices was really getting out of hand, in my opinion, and leading almost to where we were in 06 and 07, which was kind of scary, because it has then a ramification of the spillover on economic development and business attraction if you're known as a expensive community, housing expensive community. So the fact that it's cooling off is good. And Tom makes an excellent point. Years ago, when I bought my first house, if you could get 3%, 4% growth a year, that was great. We started believing 8, 9, 10, 12 was a permanent state of mind. And it's not. It's not a good thing in the long term. It sounds good when you're selling. It's not a good thing when you have those kind of rates of growth. But you know, there's some issues out there right now. But I mean, it's cooling off, and we're getting to more stable, sustainable growth, barring any unknown circumstances that maybe Mike can speak to in terms of some economic disruption that causes some challenges. But I think it's steady as she goes right now.
And Mike is saying if we do have some type of slowdown or a cool off that is maybe recession-esque, it's not going to happen in 2020. Do you agree with that? Do you think we're looking at a couple years off here?
Yeah, I mean, the consensus among most economists, and you know, the financial guys look at things a little differently. It's 12 to 18 months, so probably late 2020, early 2021, we'll see some kind of correction. Again, it's going to depend on if we continue seeing a slowing in the rate of growth in manufacturing at the national level, and the trade issues, the job growth numbers. So we're tracking things very closely, and we're really looking at changes in rates of growth.
And Mike, let's talk.
That's what's slowing a little bit.
And let's talk about that, the changes of rates of growth. We mentioned the trade. This is a big thing in the media too, trade wars and tariffs, and potentially being the catalyst to a recession. Are you seeing that? I mean, if let's just say that no trade agreements happen prior to the 2020 election, I mean, is that going to expedite what might happen here? There's
no question that the trade war is a cloud hanging over the economy and the markets right now. Earlier this week, we saw the manufacturing numbers come out for the United States showing that manufacturing has fallen technically into a recession. Now, we don't have a great deal of manufacturing in Nevada, and it's only about 12% of the national economy, but it is something that people look at as a bellwether. Then we saw the non-manufacturing, the services sector came out this week, and it was also much slower nationwide. So we see two very important things this week that tell us that the economy in the United States is slowing, and it has to do with where we are in the cycle, and it has to do with the trade situation. And we've got to mention that our 3 or 4 of our largest employers get a great deal of their revenue from outside the United States. Our gaming companies get a great deal of revenue from Macau and in some cases Singapore. And we'd be foolish not to understand that tension between the United States and China has the ability to spill over and impact our biggest employers.
Do you think we have any chance of China making deals maybe before the presidential election? It seems, and maybe I'm assuming too much here, that they don't have much incentive to make trades before the election.
Well, that's a good question. I think that there is certainly a chance that they will. It really depends on both sides, and it's a very obscure process. We don't know what these talks involve. We know that there are some inequities in that trading system, talking about forced intellectual property transfer and a variety of things that have to be corrected because there is an inequity between the two systems. Mm-hmm. And China realizes that. The question is, how motivated are they? Well, these tariffs have hurt them quite a bit, and the Chinese economy is feeling this quite a lot. So I think that there is a chance. Mm.
John, let's talk about just the consumer spending side of this, right? I mean, this is a huge part of our economy, and consumer spending is good. Typically, we're okay. Are we seeing any indicators at all that consumer spending is also kind of going into a recession? It's
interesting. I was looking at those numbers, yesterday in preparation for today. The retail sales numbers, taxable retail sales numbers are still pretty strong here in Southern Nevada. That's partially driven by tourist spending here as well. I think 20 to 25% of our spending and taxable sales come from tourists, and that's pretty healthy. Consumer confidence is still pretty strong. Business confidence is weakening a little bit. Yes. We see that in some of the numbers that come out of the conference board. The challenge for us is, I think, and that's why we're starting, I'm a little concerned right now as the job market slows, is that a lot of our consumer spending has been driven by growth in debt. Consumer debt is now ramping up. It's been ramping up for about 4 or 5 years now. And so that's people putting money on credit cards, not living within their means, so to speak. So that's been driving the consumer spending. And we'll see how long that is sustainable, because people are going to have to pull back a little bit, right, in terms of if there's a concern of a slowdown on the consumer spending side, because it is about 75% of the economy in general is consumer spending. So there are some things out there that we just need to watch closely now. And what I say at presentation when I talk to clients, I always say, listen, we're not falling off the map, but don't ignore the numbers either. They'll go into a bunker, but if things are starting to slow down a little bit, pay attention to it. Don't ignore it. Don't stick your head in the sand and pretend it's not happening. Just kind of be aware that things are out there that you should just be aware.
And Tom, I'm going to ask you that same question. We're talking about consumer spending here. We're talking about maybe an increase in debt. We're looking at homeowners maybe being a concern. We're talking about something like debt. I mean, what are you telling homeowners right now? Well,
before we get to that part, let me get to the consumer debt part. What worries me is as people build up equity, they start churning the home ATM and start refinancing their homes with the low interest rates and pulling out money to pay off their consumer debt and then recharging on their credit cards. And we start getting into that spin cycle, which I think partially caused the Great Recession, because everybody's getting equity, refinancing, and then doing it over and over and over again to where finally, at some time you have to pay the piper.
Right.
Yeah.
And there was no more room to, pull out equity to pay off the consumer credit cards.
Are you seeing any indicators of that happening now in the market?
We have a lot of people refinancing their homes for the equity to get out and get a lower interest rate. Thank you. But I don't know if they're really refinancing and pulling money out, because I'm not in the lending business. It worries me a little bit. It's something we need to watch. Those that are watching this, I hope they're not doing it. But if they are, be careful, because that hopefully you learned before. If you got caught, don't do it again.
Right. Well, Tom makes a good point. If you're refining a home and taking the money out and putting it into savings or investing in it, Mike, for example, it's one thing. Pulling it out and buying another car or going on vacation or whatever you're going to do.
You haven't learned.
That's and Americans, we just love to spend money unnecessarily. Yeah.
One of the groups hardest hit during the 2000 recession, as I said, were contractors. We sat down with the Nevada Contractors Association CEO, Sean Stewart, to discuss how the industry has recovered. Take a look.
2008 was the first time we had really experienced a major slowdown in Nevada history that I'm aware of in the construction industry. So this was all new territory. For contractors, the recession was really tough. Lots of them had billions of dollars worth of backlog that was erased in one day. We had over 110,000 workers here in the Valley. A lot of our contractors either had to move out of state or went out of business. I don't think that the market itself has rebounded to our 2006 levels. We lost a lot of workers in the recession, and not all those workers have come back. Most of the contractors that survived and are here today lived through the recession. They understand what needs to be done. They understand how to right size and to diversify. For a long time, our contractors built casinos and highways. That's what we did. And as you've seen, there's a lot of new industry coming to town. Project Neon, City Center, working on Resorts World, the stadium. Almost every major project here in the Valley are done by members of the Nevada Contractors Association. We heard so much in the recession that we needed to diversify. My question to them would be, have we done enough? Do you think we're diverse enough now that if tourism takes a slide because of a nationwide recession, will we have enough here to keep us busy?
So John, I want to come to you first. You've talked a lot about discretionary spending and the fact that we are a gaming and tourism fueled economy, a retail fueled economy, and then construction as well. It's really amplified what we went through in 2008. Right. To Steve's question, I mean, if tourism slides again, how is our economy going to fare this time around?
It'll get hit again. I mean, while we've made great strides in moving to having a more economic developed economy or economic diversified economy, and there's a difference between economic development and economic diversification if you want to get into the weeds with that, but we're still lagging a bit. It takes a long time to turn the economy around. The Great Recession taught us, but we weren't diversified. The best I could tell prior to the Great Recession, our economic development strategy was to say, California, you're lousy, we're not. You see how well that worked, right? And so we've made great strides, but we're still largely a gaming dependent or visitor dependent economy. About a third of our jobs are in the gaming industry. It's lower than it was, but it's still a major part of our economy. And so we're moving toward that diversification, but we are one of the least diversified economies in the world, in the country for a metro our size, right? And so
I'm assuming, I mean, when we talk about diversifying an economy, I know it's been 10 years, 10 years is a lot, but it doesn't seem like it's a lot when you're moving a boat of something like that, where you're diversifying an economy away from gaming and tourism. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's hard because it speaks to the development of the workforce, it speaks to the educational system, it speaks to so many cultural aspects of it. There are huge challenges and time. It takes a lot of time, talent, and treasure, as I like to say, and political will to really become diversified. Again, we're moving steadily in that direction, but we are still a bit susceptible to the downturns in consumer spending, And then finally, and when you add the whole issue of pending widespread automation across all industries, particularly in the resort industry and tourism industry, that's another issue that we need to really think about longer term.
Yeah, and Mike, longer term, but short term, we're looking at what we have done to diversify, and I got to bring up the sports angle to this, right? We are still visitors, it's still gaming and tourism, but yet we do have the Raiders coming in 2020. And I just looked at the convention schedule. It's full, it's booked. I mean, even if we had a recession, are we more recession-proof just based on how we've kind of set ourselves differently in the tourism and gaming inside?
I wouldn't use the phrase recession-proof. What I'd say is that during this next 12 or 18 months, because of some of these large projects we are somewhat insulated from the national trends. They will catch up with us at one point, but we have Raider Stadium, we have Resorts World, we have the Convention and Visitors Authority expansion, and those pump a lot of money like steroids into our system. Those are jobs that eventually come to an end and those businesses stop spending money on construction, and we will feel that at one point. We need the national economy to be strong at that point as well, because we need to make sure that national consumers come here. So we are not recession-proof, but we have this fortunate timing episode right now where we have a bit of insulation because of these larger projects.
Correct.
Tom, let's talk about construction then. Back to the clip here. We may be more diversified setup to weather a recession if it does come. Are you seeing that? Are you seeing a more diversified and a different way of planning how construction is working?
Yeah. And remember, all those folks need homes, and that's helped a lot with our housing and our tight inventory that we have. But the question I have is it's hard to really number exactly how many of those folks that are working in construction are renting versus owning. And right now, you know that if you're trying to rent a house, rents are just astronomical and hard to find. I mean, I've heard one construction company is coming to do just one section. They're going to build just of rentals. You know, not to sell, but just building a whole section of a community that's just going to be rental homes. So that's a little worrisome to me, but we'll see what happens. So it's hard to say.
And if we were to hit a stage where growth stopped, both housing construction stopped and maybe more the commercial construction stopped, I mean, how impactful would that be?
Look, Las Vegas, Southern Nevada is always going to be a draw. I think anytime there's been no growth, prices have gone off the charts. So it'd be a very good thing for those that did hold housing. It'd be terrible for those that wanted to come in. So for those that had, it's always good. For those that want to get in, it's always bad when you can't find anything more of anything.
Mike, for the viewers that are watching right now, and we're talking potentially about impending recession, nothing as severe as what we saw in 2007, but yet we as consumers probably could use some advice on how to tighten our belts right now. What kind of advice would you give?
Well, several things have been mentioned around the table already here. We are in a good spot right now with people are seeing equity in their homes. They need to not draw that down, right? When I look at what the consumer is feeling right now, the consumer wakes up in general across the United States and realizes that the labor market is strong, so they're probably not at risk of their job going away. Their home is worth more than it was several years ago, and it's fairly stable. Their 401k account is worth more than it was at the beginning of the year, and it's been going up for a few years. And when they go to the gas pump, they're not feeling gouged. Those are all very, very important indicators for consumer confidence. We don't have to be brilliant here. We just have to not screw this up. Don't overspend. Use any economic opportunity to continue to save. We know Americans and Southern Nevadans just as well are undersaved for retirement and for emergencies. This is the time. These are the good times in which we store our nuts so that we can use them like chipmunks down the road. We have to do that, and I don't know if everybody's really taking advantage of that.
And John, final question. We just have about 30 seconds left. Maybe our state and federal legislators here making sure that they are doing the right things and it's related to policy to make sure that we are as recession-proof as we possibly can. What would you recommend we as viewers then are communicating to our local and federal legislators?
I think one of the major challenges I think that I don't think elected officials at the federal or state level are thinking about, and this is that longer term thing I mentioned earlier, is what is going to be the impact to our community, the quality of life of our community, to the workforce in our community, to our residents with this the rapid advancement in automation, and how we're going to adjust to automation and create new jobs to counteract the jobs that could potentially be lost in automation. Most of the studies that are coming out say between 2030 and 2035, we're going to see dramatic changes in how economies in the U.S. work, and we're particularly in the urban metros like Las Vegas. And so what are we doing to prepare for that longer term? Because the cycles are going to come, as we talked about before, but this longer term, what they call fourth industrial revolution, is a major issue we need to really get serious about.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Thank you all. We really appreciate you being here and for your time. And if you at home would like to learn more about any of the topics that we have covered today, check out our website. That's vegaspbs.org/Nevada-week. Now, before we go, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the unemployment rate in Southern Nevada peaked over 15% at the height of the Great Recession. Well, we sat down with 3 Square Food Bank to discuss how they helped the community recover in 2008. Take a look.
Just as people were losing their jobs, 3 Square Food Bank arrived to help feed those in need.
Our first year of operations was 2008, but we did officially launch as a food bank in the very end of 2007.
If you ask almost any local, they'd tell you 3 Square has been around for decades. But in reality, the food bank has only been serving the Valley for 12 years.
The food bank really became the fastest growing food bank in the Feeding America network. We were kind of getting started with the typical things that food banks were already doing and just had to do them that much faster.
According to 3 Square, just under 13% of Southern Nevada is currently food insecure. Thanks to community donations and corporate sponsorships, the food bank is able to feed over 160,000 people per month.
Everybody goes through a time of need, and it's a wonderful thing that in our community we have a community safety net where people are invited and welcome and supported. We work with about 180 agencies across the valley, and those are members of the food bank. And so those members of the food bank are actually the ones that are distributing food to those in need.
3 Square's massive warehouse located near Pecos and Craig acts as a distribution center for the smaller agencies 3 Square works with. With 17 million pounds of food to pack, the bustling building sees over 32,000 volunteers every year.
That's about 2 times the size of Boulder City, actually. So that's an amazing number to be able to say that many people have come through our doors and really have said that they want to commit their time and energy to our mission.
Although 3 Square is always accepting volunteers, Vice President Jody Tyson says monetary donations go a long way.
With $1, we can stretch that into 3 meals, and that's because we have bulk purchasing power that you don't have. We're like Costco on steroids.
To learn more about 3 Square or any of the topics we've covered on today's show, visit vegaspbs.org/Nevada-week or find us on social media at Nevada Week.